been an unbelievable Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. This is Martin Luther King on steroids. I think you're better than Martin Luther King. I think you are Martin Luther King times 2. Mark Robinson, he's out there, he's fighting. He's fighting. He's a great one. I want to thank a very good man, and he's in there fighting. He's fighting, and we know he's a fighter. The next governor of North Carolina, Mark Robinson.
Once Republicans elected Donald Trump, the sort of pearl clutching over things like porn, infidelity, threats of violence. I mean, Republican Party already said that was all fine for Trump. And so the fact that he is just trafficking in the same thing, he feels like he has complete immunity, and he does. The Republican Party has let people, he's not the first, he's not the last, get away with this stuff. The problem is not just for down ballot, it's up ballot. So Democrats haven't won North Carolina since 2008, as you know. They want it so bad they can taste it. And what they are hoping is that this gubernatorial race has an up ballot effect. And with stuff like this over and over and over again, I think they'll get their wish. And of course he's not going to drop out, because with Trump and the right, Trump means never having to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Trump campaign.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to say sorry. He just needs to get out of the damn race.
Yeah,
He doesn't have to apologize. He said, just get out of the race. That's it. Just get out of the race.
You have created a party that doubles down and doubles down and doubles down.
He's an elected official that has shown a lot of affinity for Nazis. He should say that he's sorry. See, that's the thing. Like he's an elected official that has power in his state, that has shown, that's cozied up to Nazis, said he wanted to bring slavery back. There should be shame.
Has Trump apologized?
But I'm just saying, like, that's part of what we're talking about.
I understand that point from an emotional perspective, but I'm a strategist. I just would like to win. That's part of the job. This guy's not going to help Republicans win that seat.
That is the point. I don't see an evidence Republicans wanting to win. Well, starting with Trump. I mean, the stuff he is doing is repelling the very voters he will need. So I don't think winning anymore is the roadmap.
Trump is polling
it's
the best
power,
he's ever
celebrity,
polled his
and fame.
entire political career.
I take that point.
Ryan, what you're talking
but Trump
about
is,
hold
to
on,
his
Chair
point.
Michael.
Okay, sure.
Ryan, what you were talking about is his favorability rating.
No, his polling. New York Times done a poll yesterday, tied
You're
poll.
in comparison to.
Do you know there are 7 swing states where this election will be decided? It's not a national election.
Here's the issue about North Carolina.
That's not how that
Here's the
works.
issue about North Carolina. North Carolina is in play.
Yes.
It is actually in play.
Yes.
And this is actually one of the reasons.
I don't know if I would agree with it being in play. It's more competitive, and I will give the vice president some credit of making the state more competitive. I don't know if the goal is to necessarily win the state.
More competitive and in play? I mean, that is literally the
I'm going to get to the point. It's more competitive, and I think a part of the Democratic strategy is to force the Trump campaign to spend more resources there versus in a state like Pennsylvania, which is a must-win for both of those candidates if they want to get to 270. That's what I think the strategy is.
Right, and also I would sit there and say of early voting, it is much better for Republicans, at every swing state, mind you, for early voting, for early mail-in requests. Republicans are doing far better than in 2020 percentage-wise.
Trump could also say to Mark Robinson, get out of the race. And guess what? That is not happening either. His campaign, according to our reporting, there's no pressure, according to our reporting, about the Trump campaign pushing him.
He did pull the vice president off of an event.
But if I make a point to Vance's point.
Hold on 1 second. So
did he not pull it? He pulled J.D. Vance off the event.
Did Trump say that Mark Robinson should get off the ballot?
The campaign said, I don't know whether they had a private conversation or not. I have no clue. But they did pull the vice president off of an event with him.
That is not the same thing as Trump saying, which he very well could say.
That's not a full-fledged endorsement either. And
did you hear all the clips? Those were like within the last month.
Yeah, that was before this. Wait a minute, that's before this stuff came out.
That's not the same thing at all.
Are you guys doubting whether or not
Wait a second.
is Trump's guy?
Wait a second.
That was
before the Nude Africa porn site, but it was after the report.
He said people need killing.
That he frequented porn locations in South Carolina. It was after all those other wild statements. It was after the stuff that he said about Martin Luther King.
I get that.
It was after the stuff that he said about Nazis. I mean, it was after all of that.
But there are
I'm not excusing the veracity of Mark Robinson's claims. I've clearly stated that I would have preferred someone else. My point is the fact that, to Ryan's point, that Trump is appearing to distance himself from the guy. Whether or not Trump comes out and say, look, you need to get out of the race, I have no clue. But I know there are a whole lot of Republicans in North Carolina that are saying we want to win this, and he's probably not the best person to help us win.
Would you want somebody else because you want to win or because you're uncomfortable with a Nazi in your party?
I would want someone else who represents conservative values.
He
And I don't
already
think that's
said he
Mark
wants someone else
Robinson.
because he would win. And that's the
Right.
point I wanted to
Yeah.
speak to. You said people should feel ashamed. And I have to say, I'm not a strategist, I'm not a journalist, and I would say I represent more of the American people and how we really think. And like, we should feel bad if we say we're Nazis. We should feel bad
Yeah.
if we
If you
say
say you wanna-
we
if
like
you
to
do
watch
that, I mean, you would
14-year-old
wanna own
girls in the
slaves.
shower. We should
Like,
feel
that should
bad
be
if we say people should
disqualifying,
be
yeah.
killed. We should feel bad if we say women shouldn't have the vote. How did your party, from a strategy position, allow itself to get to a point where it doesn't matter that
no
these things
consequences.
don't matter?
Not-
There's no
There was-
consequences.
There was
And
no
we need to have
consequences for
consequences
Bill
in this
Clinton when he was credibly accused of rape several times. And in fact, female groups endorsed him and doubled down on it. There was no consequence for Keith Ellison when he was accused twice of domestic abuse before he ran for Attorney General, and Tim Walz defended him. There is multiple cases
I guess the
of
question
Democrats
is-
sitting there and doing something bad, and the party stands by them. That happens a lot.
So you're
Also,
saying
Republicans-
that you're going to hold
Well,
you're
should
going
it?
to hold
Should it?
That's a
yourself to
moral
the same
question. It
standard
probably
that
should not
everyone
happen.
Then I
stands.
think
No.
we should say
Hear
that.
anybody.
at
But
the
that's
top.
across the
Hang on a
board,
second,
right? It
guys.
can't just be for
Chair
one
Michael,
side.
hang on a second. We have one conversation at the table,
Sorry.
not several side conversations. Go ahead.
What was the question? Sorry.
You are holding your own party to the same standard that you
Right.
say is wrong that the Democrats held their
I
candidates
said
to.
right in the get-go, he should drop out. I said it right when I first walked in. I said he should drop out. That is the truth. I do feel that way. And not just because of the porn stuff. There are many, many, many things he has said over time that I am very uncomfortable with.
But
Nonetheless,
let's not
and
pretend
still,
it's moral courage to pull the VP from an event hours after all of this stuff came out, when you could have simply said, this is not my guy, this doesn't represent us, and he can't win. I mean, there's no moral courage to do any of that.
And to
We're
speak to-
talking about should
all
as
of
if
those
there's a
things are
world
true.
out
Right,
there
guys.
in
In
which we
which
could
been-
live in. That world is gone.
Yeah.
It's gone.
We're
Mark
gonna leave
Levin
it
But
right
we should
there.
certainly get back
We are
to it.
going
Wouldn't
to
you
leave
agree?
it there
love that.
for